Barcelona goes all in. Laporta is preparing a massive transfer to rescue the club. Neymar's move to Juventus? We reveal the current situation. Arne Slot has announced a stunning squad overhaul, selling 7 Liverpool players. Who is on this list? And Benjamin Šeško snubs Newcastle for a sensational move to Manchester United. All that and loads more in today's episode. But before we get into it, as always, don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up. Ready? Let's jump into the latest transfer rumors. Benjamin Šeško has started a proper war between Manchester United and Newcastle. And honestly, the situation is a complete mess. On one hand, it looks like the Slovenian has one foot in the door at Old Trafford. Fabrizio Romano has already reported that Šeško has a full personal agreement with Manchester United, a contract until 2030, all sorted. The Red Devils are confident. They believe the player has chosen their project. Their offer to Leipzig is 85 million euros. Not bad. You'd think it was a done deal, but then Newcastle gatecrash the party and spoil everything. The Magpies have just gone nuts and offered 90 million euros for Šeško. That's 5 million more than United. And of course, RB Leipzig, who want to rake in as much cash as possible, have already accepted Newcastle's offer. That's according to The Athletic. So the club has an agreement, but the player doesn't. Šeško, it seems, is a very cunning lad. Florian Plettenberg dropped some brilliant info. Apparently, the Slovenian told Manchester United he wants to play for them. And then he whispered sweet nothings to Newcastle, telling them they're future champions and that he dreams of joining them. His agents have basically agreed contracts with both clubs, just to get the best possible terms and see who'll pay more. Fair play to him, I suppose. So we're left with a crazy situation. Leipzig want to sell the player to Newcastle because they're offering more money. Šeško himself, if you believe most insiders, is leaning towards Manchester. He doesn't care about the Champions League that the Magpies can offer. He's more interested in the status and the project at United. But 90 million euros for Šeško. Seriously? I know we live in an age where you pay that kind of money for potential, not for what a player's done. He's only scored 27 goals in 2 Bundesliga seasons. That's a decent return, but not 90 million euros decent. For me, it's a massive overpayment. But who cares when you've got Saudi money or the Manchester United brand? So what's the bottom line? Leipzig are pushing Šeško to agree to the Newcastle move. United are pushing Šeško, reminding him of their agreement. And Benjamin himself is sitting back and choosing. The final say is with the player, and by the looks of it, he's made his choice in favor of Manchester. So the Red Bulls will probably have to cave and accept United's offer, even if it's less profitable. But for now, it's all pointing towards Šeško pulling on that red shirt. The latest reports have emerged from the chaos that is FC Barcelona. Just when you thought they couldn't sink any lower, they've managed to find a new depth. The club has opted to wage war on Marc-Andre ter Stegen, employing methods that are a case study in toxic leadership. Follow the sequence of events. Ter Stegen undergoes surgery on his back. How does the Blaugrana hierarchy respond? Not merely by wishing him well, but by identifying a cynical financial opportunity. La Liga regulations state that if a player is sidelined for over 4 months, a club receives leeway on its salary cap, allowing it to use a portion of that player's wages to register a newcomer. Barca saw this as their golden ticket. They compiled the necessary documents and petitioned La Liga to certify that their captain was incapacitated long-term, thus permitting them to register Joan Garcia. This moves beyond mere cynicism into a realm of utter unscrupulousness. The most interesting turn, however, is that ter Stegen proved to be nobody's fool. He assessed the situation and stated, "I will not consent to my medical information being shared with the commission." In doing so, he blocked the club's entire maneuver. He is perfectly aware that they are trying to cast him aside, and he refuses to facilitate it. It is here that Barcelona reveals its true nature. Rather than seek a resolution, they escalate the insanity. The club has consulted its legal team to initiate disciplinary action against ter Stegen for a refusal deemed economically and sportingly detrimental to the team. In essence, the club intends to sanction its player for declining to have himself declared medically unfit, so they can replace him. Let us apply logic and examine the facts. Ter Stegen is 33. He commands a huge 11 million euro salary, which is crippling a club with 1.2 billion euros of debt. He has become more injury-prone. And the 24-year-old Joan Garcia is on paper a sensible long-term replacement. The business rationale is sound, but the methods are reprehensible. more befitting a ruthless corporation than a great football club. Yet the German international does not emerge from this unscathed. He surely understands his era at the club is ending. But instead of negotiating a graceful departure, he is proving obstructive. His interviews in Germany, feigning ignorance about a new goalkeeper, are frankly immature. The result is a classic scenario with no heroes. Barcelona's conduct is disgraceful, showing a complete lack of class towards a club legend. Ter Stegen is acting like a stroppy superstar who cannot face reality. The endgame? It's unlikely to be pretty. La Liga will probably find a way to verify the injury's duration independently. Barca will get what they want and register Garcia. And Marc-André Ter Stegen's legacy will be that of a great keeper, but also a captain who was taken to a tribunal by his own club over his medical leave. Mais qu'un club, indeed. More like a shambles. You know, sometimes you see a news story that just makes you laugh out loud. Well, this is one of them. The Spanish rag Fichajes, which you'd have to be mad to take seriously, drops this inside scoop. Manchester United are preparing a €200 million bid for Vinicius Jr. Just think about that. United, who barely scraped into the top 15, buying the main man in attack from Los Blancos. This isn't just fantasy football, it's a complete fever dream. Apparently, Ineos have decided they need a flagship signing, to make a statement. And they couldn't think of anything better than trying to poach Vinicius. And the logic, you ask? I'll tell you, there is none. But they're clinging to rumors that Vini and Real have some friction over a new contract. Supposedly, the Brazilian took one look at Mbappé's salary and wants a fatter slice of the pie, and Florentino Perez, as usual, doesn't want to be pushed around by players and wreck the wage structure. And at that exact moment, according to Fichajes, Manchester United burst onto the scene with a suitcase full of cash. Like, we'll give you whatever you want, just come to us. It's such a classic cheap ploy from the player's agent. It's almost embarrassing. A textbook scheme to put pressure on Perez. Look, Flo, if you don't sign our boy on our terms, he's off to that circus at Old Trafford. And the funniest part is that United seem to have actually fallen for it and think they have a chance. Just a quick break here to ask you to give this video a like or a dislike. Either way, your feedback is a huge help. Cheers for the support, it makes a real difference. Let's engage our brains for a second. You're Vinicius Jr., you play for the best club in the world, you challenge for the Champions League every year. Your teammates are Bellingham, Valverde, and Mbappé. And you're being asked to trade all that for what? For a team where your main attacking partner is Rasmus Højlund, who spent the whole season walking around with the face of a sulking child? It's voluntary exile. You'd have to be completely insane to agree to such a downgrade. United need world-class players to compete with City and Arsenal. No one's arguing with that. But players like that won't join a team that's floundering mid-table and offers nothing but a giant salary. It's a trap the club has fallen into dozens of times. Buying stars past their prime or just overpaying massively for players who didn't want to be there in the first place. This Vinicius story is the peak of this failed strategy. Of course, Ineos want to make an impression, but this doesn't look like a power move. It looks like a gesture of desperation. Instead of methodically building a team, plugging gaps with quality, not quite superstar players, they want to buy the shiniest toy in the shop just because they can. They're ready to blow their entire summer budget on one player who will most likely just use their interest for his own agenda. The only absolutely microscopic chance that there's a grain of truth to this is if Vinicius is genuinely furious with Perez and decides to leave out of spite, but even then, he'd have a queue of clubs like PSG and Bayern, who are in the Champions League and have far more coherent projects. So, we'll just wait for Fabrizio Romano to kill this story with a single tweet saying Vini and Real are close to a contract extension. As for the Fichajes journalists, you have to tell them to lay off the hard stuff. Well, here we go again. The Saudi money vacuum has locked its sights on Liverpool once more, and the main target is Mohamed Salah. You can forget all those fairy tales about a new contract and eternal love for Anfield. When figures like these appear on the horizon, loyalty suddenly takes a backseat. Sources like Give Me Sport and Football Transfers are all screaming the same thing. The Egyptian's departure is pretty much a done deal. And we're not talking about some distant future, but the very specific summer of 2026. So the plan is this: Mo plays out one more season, then calmly packs his bags and jets off to the Middle East for a salary that will make your eyes water. Obviously, Salah isn't exactly struggling now. 400,000 pounds a week is, to put it mildly, not bad. Even after the British taxman takes his giant bite, he's left with about 13 million a year net. But you know the sheikhs will offer so much that his current wage will look like a student grant. They say a concrete offer is already on the table, just waiting for the right moment. And guess what? Rumor has it Darwin Núñez is also heading to Saudi Arabia. So Mo will get the chance to play with the Uruguayan finishing genius again. That's probably the main reason for the move, right? Not the money. Just imagine that link up somewhere like Al Hilal. The defenders in the local league just won't stand a chance. For Liverpool, let's be honest, this is a disaster. Yes, the summer of 2026 is still a way off, but the club needs to start thinking now about how to live without the Egyptian king. Because finding a replacement for him is a mission impossible. He's not just their top scorer, he's the system, an icon and the face of the club for years. You can only feel for Arne Slot. He'll be stuck with the task of replacing an asset as valuable as Mo. So yeah, you can believe in the nice stories all you want, but the facts are stubborn things. For Salah, it looks like everything is already decided. One more year and then goodbye, Premier League. An era is ending right before our eyes. Barcelona have decided to play EAFC on God mode again. Joan Laporta, in the starring role, grabbed a microphone and cheerfully promised if he's re-elected in 2026, he'll sign Erling Haaland. No messing about, no small talk, just straight in on the first date, Haaland, come to Barcelona. And you could understand it if it was some oil-rich state with 3 clubs. But this is Barca, a club that's been living by the motto, if it's on credit, it's mine, for years. The same lot who were selling off their media rights just to stay afloat. And now, Laporta, up to his eyeballs in debt, comes out and says, how about we spaff 150 million euros on Haaland? Absolutely genius strategic thinking. After that Vegas-style spending spree, pulling all those levers, after the whole club has been held together with sticky tape and chewing gum, the president decides to surprise everyone again. Let's go and buy the guy who cost as much on Transfermarkt as our entire backline, plus half the roof of the Camp Nou. But honestly, the funniest thing about this circus isn't that someone promised to sign Haaland. It's that anyone still believes it. Haaland, you see, is moving to Barcelona. And not just moving, but in 2026 no less. Okay, let's just imagine. Let's say, just in time for the 2026 election, Barca finds a sack of gold under the Spotify Camp Nou, sells a dozen non-football assets and gets serious. Could they, in theory, sign Haaland? Well, purely theoretically, yes. City obviously wouldn't be thrilled, but if Haaland's relationship with Guardiola really is souring, if he suddenly decides he wants a new challenge, some fresh air and a game against Osasuna in La Liga, maybe he'd just say, all right, I'll give it a go. The only problem is, there will be a lot of clubs around the world after Haaland. And not all of them, unlike Barca, are trying to sign a superstar on finance. And then there's the tiny, almost unnoticeable detail, his wages. Haaland's on about 30 million quid a year, and he's not exactly going to take a pay cut. And with their current wage bill, the Blaugrana are already sailing close to the wind. La Liga's financial police are already waving red flags and screaming, lads, stop, you're in deep enough already. But Laporta is still chirpy, insisting that by 2026, everything will be under control. Plan B? Julian Alvarez. Now that sounds a bit more realistic. The Argentine is on fire, a top-level player, and almost half the price of Haaland. But even then, cheaper doesn't mean available. Atletico won't just let him go without a fight. Basically, Laporta is once again going into an election not with a plan to build the club from the inside, but with a shiny sweet wrapper. Here's Haaland, here's hope, now vote for me. Personally, I'm just waiting for him to say, you know, circumstances have changed. Instead of Haaland, we've signed a promising striker from the Uruguay U19s. But keep the faith, the project is ongoing. You know that old saying about greed being a man's downfall? Well, the saga with Marc Guéhi and Newcastle is a textbook case of Crystal Palace shooting themselves in the foot. Just get your head around this. A year ago, Newcastle, desperate for a center back, come to Palace and slap £60 million on the table. For a defender they bought from Chelsea for £18 million. That's more than a threefold markup. You'd think they'd take the money and run to buy 3 new players. But no. The Eagles bosses, thinking they were the wolves of Wall Street, said, £70 million or he stays. Newcastle obviously thought they were mad and walked away. A year has passed. Palace, fair play to them, managed to win the FA Cup, but what's really changed? What's changed is Gueye has just 1 year left on his contract. So the Magpies are back, but not as beggars. They've come back to have a laugh. Their offer now? A pathetic £40 million. That's not a negotiation, that's just taking the mickey. It's a message. Lads, remember how you played hardball last summer? How's that working out for you? And the funniest part is that Palace are still trying to act all high and mighty, demanding £50 million. For a player who in 10 months can just wave them goodbye and leave for absolutely nothing. Now let's put ourselves in Marc Guéhi's shoes. You're the team captain, one of the best English defenders. Last year they wanted £70 million for you. And now they're telling you, Mark, we turned down a mountain of cash, so be a good lad and sign a new deal on our terms. Why on earth would he? He's in the best position of anyone right now. He can just see out the season and then start an auction for his own services next summer. Liverpool, Bayern, Barcelona, all those clubs are already queuing up. They won't pay Palace £50 million. Why would they? They'd rather wait and give Guéhi himself a signing-on bonus of, say, 20 million quid. The player gets everything, and his current club gets sod all. And Guéhi knows this perfectly well. His statement that he's ready to see out his contract is a direct ultimatum to his club. In this situation, the Palace board should be tearing their hair out and running to Newcastle shouting, "Take him for 40, just take him!" But they're still clinging to that £50 million like it's a life raft made of concrete. They're still living in last summer's reality where they held all the cards. Every day that Guéhi stays at the club without a new contract is money down the drain for them. Oliver Glasner must be fuming. He built a team around Guéhi, and now he'll likely have to watch his captain leave without the club getting enough money for a proper replacement. For Newcastle, this is classic. They always get dragged into these long, painful negotiations where clubs try to squeeze every last penny out of them because of their moneybags reputation. But here, it seems they've finally learned to play the long game. They know Palace are trapped. They can happily wait until the end of August, and the closer the deadline gets, the more willing the Eagles will be to talk. They'll probably meet somewhere around £45 million, and it'll still be daylight robbery compared to last year's figures. This whole situation is a perfect lesson in how not to do transfer business. By gambling and turning down £60 million, Crystal Palace have put themselves in a position where losing only £20 to £25 million compared to last year's offer will be considered a success. But more likely, they'll lose everything. And when Marc Guéhi is posing in a Liverpool or Bayern shirt next summer, the Palace bosses will be left rewatching highlights of the FA Cup final, wondering if that victory was worth such a financial hit. Spoiler, it wasn't. Liverpool have decided to have a massive clear-out. The publication Liverpool.com claims the Reds are ready to show the door to 7 players at once. The reasons are dead simple. They need to make some cash and get rid of the deadwood that will just be warming the bench under the new tactics. And let's be honest, after a transfer window like this, it was always on the cards. The club has just pulled off possibly the biggest spending spree in its recent history. The Florian Wirtz transfer alone is something else, a complete departure from the Reds' usual style. Players of that caliber rarely end up at Anfield. The total spend is already nearing the $300 million mark, and that's without even factoring in the potential signing of Alexander Isak. With an attack like that, the club isn't just the favorite to defend its title, it's an absolute monster. So it makes sense they now need to trim the squad. And first on the chopping block is Darwin Núñez. His future probably has nothing to do with the Isak talks. Liverpool are ready to get rid of him either way. But let's be real, his sale could cover most of the price tag Newcastle will slap on their striker. And right on cue, Al Hilal have popped up. The Saudis have made the Uruguayan their top target. They were interested back in June but decided to wait until after the Club World Cup. Now, according to TalkSport, they're fully focused on reaching an agreement with the player himself before making an official offer to Liverpool. Núñez himself doesn't seem to mind the idea. At the end of last season, he made it clear he was unhappy with his game time, and this move offers both money and main man status. He was previously open to a move to Al Nassr, but Liverpool blocked the deal, not wanting to weaken the squad mid-season. The situation is different now. Luckily for the Reds, the Saudi Pro League clubs are willing to pay top dollar, so there's a good chance of getting most of their money back and finally closing this chapter. Next on the list are players with much smaller roles. Take Tyler Morton. The lad has only played a couple of Premier League games but is close to a $20 million move to Lyon. That's pure profit for the club, a perfect deal. Then there's Kostas Tsimikas. The Greek was already playing second fiddle, and with new arrivals like Kirkez and the ever-present Andy Robertson, his chances of getting minutes are now close to zero. so his departure is just a matter of time while he weighs up his options. But the real drama is the situation with Federico Chiesa. His transfer from Juventus last summer looked odd from the start and ended up being a complete flop. The Italian was the only new signing in that window, signed a 4-year deal, and played just 6 Premier League games. 0 goals, 0 assists. According to Calcio Mercato, Federico himself wants to stay and fight for his place, but he's been given a pretty clear hint that's not going to happen. Friends, don't just leave this video without a reaction. It really helps the channel out. Give it a thumbs up or down, preferably right now, and drop a comment, we'd be grateful. He recently spoke to the new Italy manager, Gennaro Gattuso, who told him straight, if you want a national team call-up, you have to be playing regularly. Sitting on the bench at Liverpool, even a title-winning one, is not an option. Chiesa's priority now is a top Serie A club playing in Europe. Napoli are the most active, but Milan, Inter, and Roma are also in the race. Liverpool are willing to let him go for a moderate fee, or even a loan with an option to buy. Basically, the club has admitted its mistake and is trying to cut its losses. And finally, Harvey Elliott. This is where they could really cash in. Rumor has it that RB Leipzig have already contacted Liverpool about a transfer. TalkSport reported on the Germans' interest earlier in the summer, and now, according to The Athletic, talks are in the initial stages. Elliott only made 2 Premier League starts last season, and the club values him at around £40 million. The most interesting part of this story is the Jurgen Klopp factor. The German now heads up Red Bull's global football operations, and it's pretty obvious he's the one pushing for the transfer of a player he always believed in. It looks like Jurgen has decided to stage a friendly robbery of his former club by taking one of its most promising talents. Well, the big clear-out at Anfield is in full swing. Marco Asensio's proposed transfer to Fenerbahce has officially collapsed. The move to Turkey appeared to be a certainty, with the reputable journalist Yaz Sabuncuoglu reporting a full agreement with PSG in early July. However, several weeks have passed without the deal being finalized. And who has re-entered the picture? Unsurprisingly, Aston Villa, who have renewed their pursuit of the Spanish international. Villa have been transparent about their urgent need for an attacking midfielder before the transfer window closes. Asensio, having spent the latter half of last season on loan with them, remains their primary target. And while hopes were previously slim due to the Fenerbahce negotiations, the landscape has now shifted significantly. According to Birmingham World, Unai Emery is determined to bring Asensio back to the club. He views him as a crucial component to elevate his squad. The pieces are beginning to align. Fresh reports from L'Équipe indicate that Asensio's tenure at PSG has definitively come to an end. Luis Enrique has directly informed the player that he does not feature in his plans, despite having a valid contract. Consequently, the Parisian club is motivated to offload him. The Spanish publication Estadio Deportivo adds another layer to the story. The transfer to Turkey fell through because Asensio was unwilling to accept a salary reduction. The player desires stability and financial security, which is hardly surprising. And Villa are prepared to offer him both. Sources suggest the club has already signaled its willingness to facilitate his return. Asensio enjoyed his time in England, has a strong working relationship with Emery, and feels valued by the manager. The club is pushing for a second loan spell. Notably, Villa are willing to cover his entire €150,000 per week salary, despite their own constraints with the wage bill. This indicates the strength of Emery's conviction in persuading the board. Just as the path to Villa Park seemed clear, a new suitor has emerged, AC Milan. The Italian giants have initiated negotiations with PSG and have reportedly reached a preliminary agreement. Naturally, PSG's preference would be an outright sale rather than another loan. And in that regard, Milan's offer may prove more appealing. As a result, Asensio's future remains unresolved. His departure from PSG is certain. He wishes to play in a top European league. Aston Villa and Emery are eager for his return and are prepared to meet his financial demands. But Milan's late entry into the race could complicate matters significantly. The market remains open, and the coming days will reveal which club will prove to be the most persuasive. Neymar is back at Santos. On the surface, it's a beautiful story, a homecoming to where he's loved, where his career began, where he became Neymar. But if you look closer, that romance disappears fast. You know where else the romance is disappearing? From my soul, when I see that most of you are regular viewers, but you haven't subscribed, you're like Neymar himself, back at Santos but not fully committed. Let's make this return a proper one. Subscribing is your official transfer to our club. No medicals and no tax breaks, but it comes with a lot of heart. The Santos of today isn't the club that fights for trophies or even a top 4 spot. The team is hovering in 15th place, and it's such a sewer that even Pele couldn't drag them out, let alone Neymar in his current state. Yes, he's come to help, but who is there to save? The level of his teammates is below rock bottom. Neymar himself isn't firing on all cylinders either, just 3 goals in 9 games, plus more injuries. Add to that his poor fitness and a total lack of motivation. He was apparently planning to put himself in the shop window and get a move back to Europe, to Barcelona to be precise. But with form like this, that's pure fantasy. And let's not forget, the second division is looming. If Santos get relegated, what hope is there for Europe? Although, it's not that simple. Because according to La Gazzetta dello Sport, the Turin club are seriously considering a move for Neymar. But let's be honest, Igor Tudor and Neymar are like oil and water. Tudor demands pressing, intensity, hard graft, while Neymar just wants to get over his injury and play a bit of pretty one-touch stuff. So why would Juve want him? Simple, marketing. His name still sells, shirts with his name on them still fly off the shelves, and his Instagram is more alive than ever. The Bianconeri are convinced that thanks to tax breaks and sponsors, the transfer will pay for itself. What's more, they think it could even be more profitable than signing Ronaldo. And to be fair, that doesn't sound completely insane. Neymar can't afford to be picky right now. If there's even the slightest chance to get a foothold back in Europe, he has to jump at it. Juventus, even in its current state, is not Santos. And it's not Al Hilal. It's still a club with ambition, with history, and a platform for a comeback. Barcelona are unlikely to call, but Juve? They're pretty much knocking on his door.